You are live. Welcome, boys and girls. This is the so-called ACE Theological Discovery Room. It's kind of like Romper Room. We try and wave at everybody. Oh, heck, I knocked myself off the screen for a second.
Don't knock yourself out.
Yeah, this is kind of like Romper Room. It's the ACE Theological Room. We try and wave at everybody when we're on the way out. If you remember that Romper Room lady, she would say, I see George, and I see Nancy, and I see Bobby. I see you guys out there. I'm listening. Can't do much about it, but I think I'm listening. Anyway, this is going to be a special episode. This is an interview with a madman. And I don't know why he thinks he's a madman, but that's what he suggested for a title, and why not? So, welcome, Mr. DB. You're a favorite around here because you're so annoying, but I think you're a blessing. So there.
Well, a lot of times I just try and make people think. I taught for 17 years, and you can't get the teacher out of me, it seems.
Mm-hmm. So you don't care what they think about, just as long as they think.
Yeah. And it's like, here's some alternate information. And consider it. Don't just ignore it or throw it out or argue with it, just like I do with you. A lot of things that you say, it's like, oh, that's interesting. I never thought about that. Like, free will, is there or isn't there? I don't know, but I'll listen to both sides and both arguments and like, well, that makes sense. Well, that makes sense. Well, I don't get that. I don't get that. So it's like I try and be, and that's from my education, was first thing you learn in anthropology is get rid of your biases. Don't take a side. Mm-hmm. Look at all sides and then report what both sides say. Same in history. That's a good historian. That's a good anthropologist, good archaeologist. You don't come up with an idea and then go look for stuff to justify what you already believed. And that's kind of what I do. And that's why I kind of irritate people, because people don't like doing that. We love our biases.
Yeah. Yeah. As I say, it's hard to think a new thought.
Yep.
So, how many years did you spend teaching school?
17 years.
And you taught what? High school, college, what?
I taught high school for about 15 years, college for about 2 years.
Who was smarter, the high schoolers or the college kids?
Tough to tell, because I only taught undergrad, so there's not much of a difference between a high school students and an undergrad. Just that one got a diploma from a high school, the other didn't yet.
According to you, which one is more worthless, high school or college?
Well, I'll give you an example. I think high school can be more important, but since I already had kids in high school, and I would give them the spiel about college. If you're going to college, pick something that pays off. Think of your tuition and books and lodging and all that stuff
my God,
as an investment.
I wish there's a lot of parents who wish somebody had gave that lecture to their kids instead of a $100,000 college bill at the end, just so they can be work at a soda shop, the modern day equivalent of a soda shop called Starbucks.
Yeah, and in my classroom, I had all my diplomas and certificates on the wall. And I had my one in history, my diploma in anthropology, and my diploma in education. And I'd point to them, I say, see this diploma in history? That's about worthless. See this one in anthropology? That's about worthless. See this one in education? That's the one that got me this great job that pays me a lot. When you go, think about, what is the payoff of this college education? Get something in it. If you want to be a televangelist, then by all means, get a degree in theology or in biblical studies
Religion,
or something. But
theology,
yeah, uh,
arguments.
right. But
I'm jamming up.
those you might find a job. You might get a job as or might become a great uh, money making apologist like William Lane Craig or somebody. But I want to be a carpenter. Well, then go. And I would tell them, because I was teaching computer science, I tell them, well, get out of my classroom and go to the carpentry shop down the hall and go there. Don't be here. Well, my parents make me. I said, well, convince your parents you don't want to do this. You want to be a carpenter. Uh, it's like, this is about, education, in my opinion, should be about survival. If there weren't jobs in comp sci, I wouldn't have taught it. I wouldn't have got into education in the first place. But it's like I had been in industry from let's see, from being an aircraft technician all the way up to being a robotics technician, industrial automation, which was another thing I had to teach my students, that no, robots are not little animated men with artificial intelligence. And I would show them, here's the most common robot of the 20th century. And I'd show them a picture of the bowling machine at the end of bowling aisles. That's a robot. What do you mean? That's not a robot. Yes, it is. It's a machine that took the place of a human being. We used to have pin monkeys, hire kids to grab the pins and set them up again at the end of the bowling alleys. Mm-hmm. And then they invented this machine that does that automatically. Mm-hmm. And while we're at it setting up the pins, let's make it so it grabs the ball and sends it up. And then later on they said, hey, you know what? We can add stuff to keep score too, because when it goes down, it can sense which pins are still standing and do the scoring for you. That's a robot. That's artificial mm-hmm. intelligence. And that's mm-hmm. been around since the 70s, 60s. But people don't know that. My kids didn't know that. So that was part of my education. What is reality? Not what is in your little head that when you think of robot, that you think of this little mechanical man. No, get that out of your head. I'm going to teach you real robotics when I taught robotics. Mm-hmm. And the kids would be like amazed because a whole new world was opened up to them.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like,
so in building a robot, what you just described, you're just solving one problem at a time as you think about it.
Yeah. And you can combine those problems mm-hmm. to make it a more advanced robot. But, think of a toaster as technically...
Yeah.
takes the place of putting the bread on the fry pan, right? And grilling that one side, flipping it over, grilling the other to make nice toasty bread. No, we got a machine that can do it. Mm-hmm. You drop the bread in here, push the slide, and it automatically times it out, toasts it the way you want it. Little settings to adjust it for different breads or different, toastiness. That's basically a robot. Mm-hmm. But we can't use that word now because we've given robot a completely different meaning. Same thing with artificial intelligence. That's the big thing now.
Thanks to Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah. And it's like we had artificial intelligence in the 80s. I had a program on my little, I think, was it my Commodore 64 maybe, had a program called Raptor, which was an artificial human. You talk to it, it would talk back to you. You could hold a conversation with it. And the advanced version of that program, run on a mainframe, wrote a book that is still in print called The Policeman's Beard is Half Constructed. And they programmed Raptor to write a book.
Huh.
And it was connected to a database of all kinds of information. and it would go back to that, and it'd bring up quotes from Mark Twain in his book and things like that, and it'd go off the wall. It sounded like a crazy person, but it sounded like a person. Crazy or not, it sounded like a person.
Yeah.
More sane than a lot of people, maybe. If you ever heard Charles Manson talk. But that's people think that now is all there ever was, and what we think now is all that there ever was. When you and I remember, the Commodore 64 and the Atari machines,
Yeah.
people think that, oh, the computer was invented with the internet in the 1990s.
Right.
No. They've been around a long time. And in fact, the internet was originally for the military, and it was so that different mainframe computers in the 60s could talk to each other for military things, so that the CIA could, in Washington, could talk to their operatives running the computers at Caltech or something, right? And they wanted, how do we get them all? And they came up with this networking system so computers could talk to each other, which is what we now call the internet. And it's gotten a lot bigger than since then, but it was originally called the Matrix.
Oh, that's scary.
Yeah. And because what is it? It's a matrix of wires.
Right. That's very similar to the.
And it's I find that stuff fascinating. People go, so what? And I like, that is fascinating that, we think of the Matrix as this movie and brains in a vat and stuff. And it's like, no, that name goes back and has a whole different connotation than brains in a vat. But, and the word we use, network, is, if you look at all the wiring connections, it looks like a fisherman's net, all these lines intertwined and stuff. Yeah, that's why we call it a net, and it's a network.
I see. Yeah, they built the. I mean, that story sounds like the parallel of the American highway system built by Eisenhower for the purpose of the military to scoot around from city to city, but then we took advantage of it. We civilians.
Yeah, they didn't. Route 66 was not for people to drive along and have fun hitting all the diners. That was to establish a mapped out route to get war materials from basically from the Midwest to the West Coast.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have Eisenhower's, major highways in. And Eisenhower got the idea from Adolf Hitler with his Autobahn.
Right.
The Autobahn was so we can get tanks and trucks and everything from one end of Germany to the other ASAP. God, I'm overeducated.
I don't think so. You just think you are. They told you that. Who told you that? That's a belief system you have.
That's true.
And I don't believe it. Because you're still learning, aren't you?
Yep. Yeah, and I never stopped learning. In fact, I love my students because they would bring stuff in, you have a 2-hour, well, in the high school, it was a 2-hour long session. And you can't beat a kid's brains with your topic for 2 hours. So they'd get bored, and it's like, somebody would raise their hand, and I'm like, what? Mr. B, what do you think about this? Oh, yeah. I don't know. Tell me what you think about it. And then we'd get this conversation going for maybe 15 minutes, just as a break from the routine, right? And I'd hear stuff from the kids that I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Where'd you get that from? Well, I heard it from so-and-so, and, or I read this book, and it's like, oh, that's cool. What's the name of that book? And I'd write it down, and then I'd look up the book they were talking about. Sounded interesting.
So what's your favorite channel on YouTube?
I think my favorite might be Pine Creek.
What do they do over there?
Well, Pine Creek is a not a hard atheist. He's just like, I don't know whether there's a God or not. There's so many to choose from. I don't know which to pick. Uh, but he'll have on other atheists, Christians, Muslims, uh, to have dialogue with them.
Mm-hmm. What's your favorite go-to website for information?
For information,
Or just or current events or whatever topic you think you're interested in at the moment.
for current events, I pretty much listen to Fox.
Oh yeah.
I don't believe everything they say. I think some of the people on there are fucking idiots, but I they do touch on things and bring up issues, whether their opinions are right or wrong. They do bring up current issues, which you don't, which you don't hear. I don't hear on any of the other channels. CNN never talks about stuff. They like ignore things. Oh, Biden's got this, Biden or the White House, whatever, has this problem, but we're not going to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is not news. It's like not talking about something isn't telling me anything about it or that the situation even exists. So that's why I like Fox, because they'll bring up stuff that nobody else wants to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And for a variety of information, I collect videos that I find interesting. I put them up on my Igtheist channel, IGTHEIST. Where's the IST? But anyways, I put them all over there, and so I only have, I think, 20 subscribers over there. But it's where I can go to find, oh yeah, I remember reading that. On there is a whole course on the Middle East from Sumeria all the way up to the fall of the temple.
Hmm.
And it's like, here's how all these cultures and it's an evolution. Judaism, for example, didn't spring out of nothingness. It sprang from the cultures around Israel. Nobody lives in a vacuum, they say. So a lot of these stories and everything, they interplay. Who stole from who or who copied from who doesn't matter. They're all kind of have similarities. And if you go back to the Mesopotamian stories, for example, the Epic of Gilgamesh and the part in there about Utnapishtim is a global flood story 1,000 years before the Jews even existed.
Hmm.
And it's like, are they the same? No, but there's a lot of similarities. It's like these stories were so good and so interesting that people kept on retelling them over 1,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some elements that stayed the same. Like Utnapishtim releases a crow from the ark to see if the land is dry. What does Noah do? He doesn't release a crow. He releases a dove because the dove is important in their culture, while the crow may have been more important, or they didn't care about doves in Mesopotamia. But there's all these parallels, and it's like that. I find that interesting. It's like, yeah, nothing comes out of a vacuum. Something doesn't come from nothing, which I could argue that one too. But it's like, I find this stuff fascinating. And it amazes me that people will take something, well, this is what I was taught, and this is what I believe, and nothing's going to change my mind. It's like, well, why? You decided not to learn anything, or you don't want to find out that maybe you didn't know everything,
Mm-hmm.
And just stuff like that. Some people drive me crazy. It's like on your side chat, I'll bring up thing and I'll ask questions, and it's like, how dare you? I'm not quoting, but it seems to me they're saying, how dare you insult my beliefs? How dare
Yeah.
you mock God? I'm like, I'm not mocking God. I'm mocking you, maybe, but not God. When
Uh-huh.
did you become God? So I rub people the wrong way like that, but I'm not a conformist. I'm not about to kiss people's ass because, oh, I'm sorry. Did I insult you? Did I make fun of your beliefs?
Maybe you
Uh,
should incorporate some coconut oil if you're going to rub them the wrong way. That'll make it smoother, you see.
yeah.
So allow me to jump in and say one of my favorite channels outside of YouTube anyway is LouRockwell.com. And every day they have a dozen articles there about politics, history, economics, scientific advancements, or mostly how crazy the world is. But every once in a while, Lou Rockwell will interview this guy named Denning. He's an old retired lawyer. He might have even been a government lawyer, like a attorney general or something. I forgot. But his last name is Denning, as I recall. And he'll come on once a year or so, and Lou Rockwell will interview him. And the whole show is about the latest books that Denning found. Oddball history books, like the true story of why the CIA killed General Patton or something like this. Just
Hmm.
fascinating stuff, and I just love it. Plus, I love it that Mr. Denning has a really deep, sweet Southern accent.
Aw.
That just charms the hell out of me to hear him talk, about ancient history, current events, and politics. And you just got to understand that, it just goes on, and I love it whenever he shows up. But because I love it, that's why I asked you if you had any favorites out there that thrilled you.
Uh, no, a lot of
Websites.
people, not, I don't know, thrill me, uh, make me think, give me new perspectives on things. Uh, and as far as religion theology goes, I like, well, the late Reverend Spong, Bishop Spong. Uh, he's out of the box. He's like, who cares? I mean, his he doesn't come out and say it, but his whole idea, along with Dominic Crossan, who started the progressive Christian movement, I guess, are like, who cares if the Bible is the Word of God, if it's perfect or whatever? What are the stories telling us today?
Uh-huh.
What does it mean? What is, and I do that too. Maybe that's why I'm drawn to him. It's like, what, I was raised with Joseph Campbell and the Power of Myth.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And it's like, we don't care if the stories are real or not. What's the message they're trying to get across to us, whether it's real or not?
Campbell
What can we take out of it?
Campbell was sure influential, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. Joseph Campbell, uh, Dominic Crossan, Reverend Spong. And then there's some university professors, I forget his name at Harvard, who did a whole thing on how the history of the New Testament. There's another one who did, what was it? I just watched it. It was how to read the New Testament as a historian. And he's like, this has nothing to do with theology. If this was just a book that had no other connections or anybody cared about it, and this book was presented to you as a historian, what do you do with it? How do you reconcile? And he was one that he did, well, for an example, he used Paul's letters versus the book of Acts
Mm-hmm.
and how they don't agree, how they
How about
differ,
how they do agree?
how they do agree and how they don't. And it's like, is Paul making shit up, or is the author of Acts making shit up, or are they both? Well, we got to say Paul is Paul, whoever Paul was, whoever wrote the letters, and that's their perspective, that's their story. Acts is, well, Luke says at the beginning of Acts and the beginning of Luke, I collected all this stuff and I'm trying to make a history based on,
Mm-hmm,
you
mm-hmm.
know, so he's collecting all this, trying to make, so maybe he got it wrong, or maybe he had a little bias. Uh, So maybe that's where there's little differences, or he got the story wrong because he didn't read Paul's letters, maybe. Uh, or he got a bastardized copy of the letters or something. We don't know because we weren't there and we don't have anything from the first 2 centuries of any of this stuff. So it's all best guessing by God, which is what history is. We don't, as a historian, don't say, well, this is exactly what happened. And this is why Abraham Lincoln did that. No, we can't get into Abraham Lincoln's brain. He could have been a frickin' con man for all we know.
And I say he was.
Yeah. And it's like, well, he might have been. He might have been God's gift to the South or something. Who we don't know. So we can't, we don't have Abraham Lincoln's brains, in a vat that we could tap into it, find out what he was thinking, just like we can't go back and, what was Abraham of Ur thinking? We don't know. We have a story about him that he didn't even write, right?
There have been hundreds of books about him. It's almost, he definitely has entered angel status since his death.
Yeah.
But the 2 best books, I think, were written by Professor De Lorenzo. One is called The Real Lincoln, and the other is called Lincoln Unmasked.
Mm-hmm.
In those 2 books, he goes into articles from the 1800s about how newspaper people who wrote the articles viewed Lincoln at the time. And he makes the argument that Lincoln was the most hated president of that day, of the country from that day backwards.
Mm-hmm.
Even his old ex-partners, law partners, hated him. And you know what caused the Civil War? What was the true reason for the Civil War?
There was a variety of things.
Well, according to me,
Okay.
it was a tax called the Tariff of 1841. It was a real unfair tax on the South, and it was a tax that said if you brought all your goods in from Europe into northern ports, then no problem. But if you brought them into southern ports, there was a heavy, heavy tax on it. So it turns out that the South was paying 80% of the federal budget. And the federal budget was largely going to build northern railroads, and that thing pissed them off. And so they tried for 20 years, from 1841 up until 1861, 20 years, to get that tax nullified. It was called the nullification movement, but the South never had the votes to pull it off because a vast majority of their population was considered 3/5 of a human. It was blacks, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't have the representatives in Congress to undo that god-awful tax. So finally they just said, we're out of here.
Mm-hmm.
And if you read Abraham Lincoln's very first inaugural address, find it on YouTube, find it on Google, he says in the first paragraph, I don't care about Negroes. But by the 8th paragraph, he says, but if the South doesn't pay their tax, there will be bloodshed and invasion.
Mm-hmm. And everybody makes a big thing about slavery and how Lincoln liberated the slaves, and they listen to the gospel instead of reading what the actual times and documents were. The Emancipation Proclamation didn't free the slaves.
I know, it was a bullshit article.
The South,
right?
And the states in rebellion. It's like they're not a part of the United States right now. You have no authority now to free anybody in the South. You're not their president. And that was in the middle, almost the end of the Civil War, that he made that proclamation. So this slavery issue was like an afterthought. And they weren't slaves until long after the Civil War.
It was a PR stunt.
Yeah, to get the abolitionists to back him up.
It didn't free Mrs. Lincoln's slaves, and it didn't free Ulysses Grant's slaves.
Well, that's because all the slaves in the North were still slaves.
Mm-hmm.
And there was an argument that several historians made that slavery was on its way out because everybody knew that employment was a better deal. Rent your slaves, don't buy them.
Right.
And when things get slow, let them starve to death. There's plenty more where those came from.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the North's philosophy. But how dare you say that employment is slavery? Well, it's a replacement for slavery. It's like, oh, we're not going to buy a car. We're just going to lease one. When we get tired of it, we just stop paying and let them take it away.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot cheaper than buying the car. That's going to be worthless in 10 years. So, yeah, that was the stories about the Civil War are bigger than the actual truth about the Civil War.
Yeah, yeah. You ever read Mary Chestnut's diary?
No.
She was a Southern wife, wife of a Confederate officer of some sort. She kept a pretty interesting diary of that time period, and it is absolutely fascinating to see the daily life of what was going on in the South. One thing I remember is that since before the Civil War started, before the country split apart, she and her high-level officer husband were invited to a Washington D.C. gala party, right? And at this party, there was a high-level Union general, and everybody knew the Civil War was coming, that the split was coming. And this general stood up at the party and held up his glass to make a toast, and he said, "Long live the Union." We lost you. I'll wait till you come back so you can hear the story. Change So Stanky, Heaven Windsong, Ronnie B, Arctic Timberwolf. Hope you're enjoying the show so far. Let's see did I miss anybody? Okay, you're back.
Yeah, I had just flaked out. A computer flaked out on me for a second there.
Okay, so this Union general held up his glass and made a toast and said, "Long live the Union." And Mary Chestnut wrote in her diary, we all knew what he meant. He meant that he was going to retire soon, and he wanted his retirement paycheck to be intact. And he didn't want to lose that.
Yeah.
I thought that was an interesting little quip on her part. In another entry in Mary Chestnut's diary, she said that she was going to a certain plantation, her and her family, to have dinner that night, and they arrived about 3:00 in the afternoon, and she saw the slaves packing up their tools, headed back home in a leisurely kind of way. And so she wrote in her diary that these particular slaves were not overworked; they were quitting at 3:00 in the afternoon. And I just thought that was an interesting little thing.
Yeah. And it was the thing with slavery, and this what ties into unions and why unions were so hated, is slaves weren't allowed to negotiate terms. And that's why employees wanted unions, because they had no say in any terms of their employment either. And it's like, which is which? And well, you could work for somebody else. Well, what if we said, okay, we're going to change slavery, that slaves could go, work for another master if they want?
Mm-hmm.
Would that make it not slavery?
The same thing. I would fit that same thing into the idea of desertion from the army. The guy just quit, so he's got a right to quit.
Yeah. And, army mentality of military throughout the ages, throughout our age at least, is you're property of the government. You're no longer a human being.
Exactly.
Do what we say or we're going to kill you.
Uh-huh.
And, okay, at time of war, you're at the front lines. We don't want you retreating. So that kind of made sense, but it's like this guy who just got fired from the military, and he's being tried, might go to military prison because he said, these generals are assholes, which everybody knew, but he came out and said, you can't do that. You're property. You don't have a right to say anything. You don't have free speech. You're in the military.
You know what fragging is?
Yeah. Yeah, that was pretty common in Vietnam.
Yeah, tell the audience what fragging is.
Uh, fragging or fracking?
Not oil fracking.
Okay, fragging is when you're in Vietnam. It was basically when the lieutenant in charge of you is a fucking asshole, and you're out on maneuvers. He actually gets a 223 through the back of his head.
Or they would throw a grenade into his
Yeah,
tent.
you'd get rid of him. You'd make him go bye bye,
Yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
that was because which is well, when I was eligible, uh, anybody with a bachelor's degree was made a lieutenant in the army.
Oh yeah.
You have a bachelor's degree in dance. Oh, you're a lieutenant. We're going to put you in charge of all these guys who actually know something. And you're going to tell them, okay, we're going to take this hill. Now, you guys run over here, and you realize there's booby traps all through the. No, there isn't any. Just go run out there.
Right.
It was the World War One all over again. Oh, we're going to go over the top and get mowed down by machine guns every other day. Well, we got new meat in. Let's send them over and let them all get massacred.
I think this if you capture or grasp this idea of fragging, and you compare it to this idea that the so-called New World Order wants a New World Order, they think they can actually make everyone cooperate. They got another thing coming, because you can't get privates to cooperate with the lieutenants all the time if they're assholes and morons. And I think it's just crazy to think that any government can control the world. I don't even see that the bankers can control everything, even though they have a lot of power. But you can't get the blacks in Watts, California, to cooperate with the Latinos who live on the other side of the street. It's just, I don't see how this new world order is going to work. Because human nature
they don't
is
realize
rather.
that these world orders or empires collapse. It's how they collapse. It's like if the Civil War in our country had gone slightly different, the Northern Empire would have collapsed. Because
Right.
half of their empire just said, screw you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting that when 7 states said, we don't want to play with you anymore, well, 13 states actually, it accumulated, but when they said, we don't want to play with you anymore, oh, we're going to kill you all. Now, compare that to the Soviet Union, when all of the Eastern European states said, we don't want to play anymore. Moscow said, okay, fuck you. We've been paying your way all this. This is really why it collapsed. Moscow said, and Russia said, fuck you. We've been supporting you. We're paying 80% of all your shit. Get the fuck out then. Go suck up to the Westerners. And then what happened? The EU came in. And what is the EU? A reincarnation of the USSR by the West. We now control Eastern and Central Europe. It's the same damn thing. But if anybody wants out of the EU, oh, there's going to be hell to pay. There will be bloodshed.
Mm-hmm.
Britain is being punished for getting out of the EU now.
Yeah, they are getting punished right now.
Yeah.
Lack of oil, no heat.
Mm-hmm.
Current events is a strange thing.
Well, one thing I'd like about history, there's so many parallels and so much going on that at the root level, it hasn't changed much. Which
It hasn't.
What I tell my kids when they say, what do you think about, where we're at in the world? I said, well, kids, as a historian, I could tell you not much has changed in 6,000 years. And as an anthropologist, I could tell you it hasn't changed much in 10,000.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that we got bigger tribes fighting each other and killing each other. And there's a book by called A Distant Mirror by Barbara Tuchman,
Hmm.
who write a history of the 14th century, and it is a parallel of the 20th century.
Kind of like Atlas Shrugged reads like current events.
Right. And it's like, okay, the 14th century. She does these parallels, like we have the ban on, uh, had the Geneva Convention banned these certain weapons, and the people in power banned, nuclear weapons. Only we can have nuclear weapons.
Right,
And you go
right.
back to the 14th century. Oh, only the king's armies can have crossbows
Wow.
because the crossbow was the advanced thing. And then what happened with the musket? Well, we can't. We got to have gun control because these people could just take metal, form a tube, put a stick on it, and kill us. We can't have that.
Mm-hmm.
So, military weapons were known to upset the balance of power within a country, let alone between countries.
Right.
And that's, in my opinion, that's why politicians want gun control because they're afraid that, well, if too many people get pissed at us, they could get rid of us real quick.
And they actually looked up the word persnickety and they realized there's a big problem here.
Mm-hmm. And uh, back when Kennedy was assassinated, my dad liked Kennedy.
Oh yeah.
Okay, he was. Well, my dad went through World War II.
How old were you when Kennedy was killed?
I was 10 years old. No, I was 8 years old.
I was 10.
And my dad said, he was like upset, and he said, "What upsets?" He said, "What really upsets me is there aren't enough rotten politicians getting assassinated."
Oh wow.
I mean, you go through World War II, you kind of, the bloodshed and the killing just becomes, well, that's a part of life. And maybe we're killing the wrong people in these wars.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like Kennedy, why was he shot? What's so terrible? Well, he had this awful, we find out later, well, he had this awful private life. So what? He was a man slut. So what? What's that got to do with the policies?
Have you studied much about his assassination?
Uh, a real lot of it, and the one that makes sense to me is we have a photograph of a secret agent standing up just at the time that Kennedy is shot, standing up with an AR-15.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, well, if you look at the damage to his skull, uh, that looks more like a wound from an M14 than it does from an old Carcano.
Right.
The Carcano is a World War One rifle, bolt action World War One rifle,
Mm-hmm.
and they were designed, not designed just by the nature of the way the bullets they used. They went in and out. They were designed to wound you because the idea was if you wound someone, an enemy, two of his friends will drag him off the field. So you took three
Right.
combatants
Right.
out instead of
Mm-hmm.
one. The 223 was designed to go in there, make a bloody mess, and kill them instantly. Because we
Right.
don't know how many, because we know that some of our enemies don't give a shit about their friends. Oh, he's dead. Keep on moving. Or
Is that as
he's
far as you
bleeding to
got?
death. Keep on going.
Is that as far as you got when in your studying of the matter?
No, I read a whole bunch of stuff on all the different conspiracies.
I knew.
There was the mafia was involved in one, the CIA in another, uh, Castro in another, and all these different theories that, yeah, they make sense. Now let's get some evidence to back it up.
Right.
But we can't because even though the records were supposed to be unsealed, they weren't. They're still unsealed. And they were
Still
supposed to
sealed.
be unsealed in 2013 by law. Oh, no, we're not going to do that.
What does that tell you?
Well, our excuse was, well, one of the people involved in that is still alive.
Oh
That
yeah.
was
Whatever.
was it one of the one of the Bushes was involved in that.
Yeah.
So, and Hillary was involved in that. So until all those people are dead, it's like, oh, we can't point out what pieces of shit these people were until they're after they're dead.
I spent a year reading material on the assassination of Kennedy. And even at 10 years old, when I was 10 years old when he was killed, at 10 years old, I remember watching that television, seeing, because that was all that was on at the time. And it seemed to me that Governor Conley in the front seat of that limousine,
Mm-hmm.
he ducked about a second and a half before the bullet shots could be heard on the television. And at the time, I thought, well, that's weird. Maybe it's sound travels not as fast as bullets.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I just
Well,
thought it was weird.
there, on almost any weapon, on any firearm, even a BB gun, you will feel the sting before you hear it. That's like my dad used to say, if you hear the gunshot, don't worry about it because it missed you.
Mhm.
It's the ones that you don't hear that are going to kill you because the bullet hits you before the sound does because they're traveling faster than the speed of sound. So if Connolly got shot in the shoulder or the hip, where was it? But if he got shot and felt, reacted to it, he would have reacted before the sound was
Yeah, he
recorded.
definitely ducked before the sound.
Yeah. So it's difficult to tell because it's like, well, let's find out exactly how much time there was and the distance between the building and the car, and we can figure out, well, how long would it take for that sound to reach?
Hmm.
And if it's a third of a second and he ducked a sixth of a second, well, there's something fishy there. But if it's like we heard the sound a second after he ducked, well, that rules out that theory that he you know
Hmm.
he reacted to being shot rather than being hearing the gunshot. It's like, no, he had a heads up or something.
Yeah, I concluded in my little 10-year-old brain that he knew what was going on. So in all of my studies, about the matter of Kennedy's assassination, I concluded that Averell Harriman was the one who ordered the execution of Kennedy. And who was Averell Harriman? Well, he was one of those super duper J.P. Morgan guys, one of those
Mm-hmm.
super duper bankers who pissed off that three things. Kennedy was pulling out of the Vietnam War, so that was going to cost him money. He was going to raise the taxes on oil, so that was going to cost him money. And he issued a silver dollar bill, a silver $2 bill that could be backed up by silver, so that pissed him off. So
Oh.
the combination of the three, Harriman ordered, I've concluded that the CIA is actually the enforcement arm of the central banking community. That was too late. Have you ever seen the YouTube video called, if you search for it, it's Secret Service Stands Down. You ever seen that video?
No, but I'm gonna.
Secret Service Stands Down. It's the Secret Service agents on Kennedy's car. On the bumper, there's a
Uh-huh.
footpad for them to stand on and a handrail they can hold on at the back of
Yeah.
his limousine. Well, just 1 or 2 minutes before the bullets started flying, they were ordered off of his car, and you can see them. You can't hear them, but you can see them doing the shoulder shrug, like, what the fuck? What the fuck? 3 times. When the Secret Service agent says, why are you calling us off the limousine? And then right after they got back into the second limousine, that's when the bullets started flying. So that's, to me, evidence that they knew, that their boss knew something was going on, so he called them
Well,
off.
my beliefs is that Lee Harvey Oswald up in that building could not have taken those shots that accurately with a Carcano, which is a great bolt action rifle. It's very accurate. People used them for deer hunting for years.
Mm-hmm.
But you put on a crappy scope and try and hit something that far away that's moving, good effing luck.
Right. And Lee Harvey Oswald said something that in the 5,000-year recorded history of humanity, that no murderer has ever said. He said, I'm a patsy.
Yeah.
In 5,000 years, all murderers either say, I didn't do it, or they say, I'm totally innocent, but no one says, I'm a patsy. And hardly anybody knows what a patsy is. Only CIA people know
Mm-hmm.
what a patsy is. So
CIA and mafia. I
he
don't
was
know whether there's
probably
much of a difference.
right,
And as other people think the mafia went away, it's like, no, they just went into government. Like New
right.
York. Well, the New York mob is gone. No, they just changed their names to Democrats and they're all elected to office now doing the same shit.
And this even happened before people were born. in Just before the Civil War started, the New York City established its own police force, and the Irish mob, sent all of their guys to work in the New York City Police Department.
Mm-hmm.
Keep tabs on them. And there's a
Yeah.
story out here in the West. I live in Utah, and up in Idaho, there's a story from the cowboy days of this sheriff in a cowboy town out in Idaho. And his posse, they were trying to catch these guys who were robbing the train, the stagecoach, and the banks. And I swear they just couldn't catch them. They just tried and tried. And the townspeople got suspicious and formed their own posse. And they caught the sheriff and his posse all masked up, robbing the stagecoach.
Yeah.
So it was
Yeah. And the reason that a lot of in the Old West, a lot of the bank robbers that were hunted down because they weren't given their fair share to the authorities.
right.
Yeah, you're not giving us. It's like the loan sharks. Oh, you're not paying up. Well, you got to pay your interest, which is, you know, daily. You owe us 10% daily.
Wait a minute, DB. I can believe what you just said. And, because of my own personal study of history and view of humanity. How come Hollywood has never come out with a bunch of movies showing this plot line that the sheriff hunts down the bank robbers because they didn't get their fair share?
Yeah,
That's not right.
well, because we set these people up like the Earps as heroes. They were criminals.
Right.
They were thieves.
You did say the other day that one of your
extortionists, ran houses of prostitution, owned all the bars, and the only reason they got ticked off at the Cowboys was because the Cowboys are like, no, we're carrying our guns. We carry them all day long on the range. Why do we have to get rid of them now? You don't trust us? No, only we're allowed to have guns. It sound familiar?
Right. Didn't you say the other day that one of your relatives was killed by Wyatt Earp and his gang?
Yeah, he was. There was a reward out for one of my relatives, and Wyatt Earp claimed the reward by bringing in a body with its head shot off by a shotgun.
Oh my God!
And said it was him. And my family was like, yeah, that could have been any warm body to get the reward. He's a sheriff, so he could claim it. And there's other documents that show that he actually did kill my relative in a shootout where he basically, what they call in the Old West, dry gulched my relative, caught him unarmed and killed him.
Mm-hmm. Well, the same thing happened to John Wilkes Booth. There was a reward out for him, and the military killed some innocent guy with red hair, red beard, and said it was John Wilkes Booth. And so Booth escaped into the wind.
Yeah.
Lived to be an old man in Texas or Oklahoma. But the reward changed the dynamics. They stopped looking for him after they killed this innocent guy and claimed that he was John Wilkes Booth.
Yeah, and that one of the big problems was all those signs of wanted, dead or alive.
Right.
Oh, we prefer him dead because, we could put any dead body there and claim it.
Oh, yeah, I see.
But if he's alive, that's not me. Or, yeah, that's me, and yeah, I didn't do it. What are you talking about? But, dead bodies tell no tales.
That's right. They bring no lawsuits either.
And that's one of my problems with a lot of religions. Not just people think I'm against Christianity. It's like, no, I cast questions on a lot of religions, it's like, hey, it's real easy to write stuff about somebody after they're dead
Mm-hmm.
and make claims. When I'm dead, you can say, oh, Dwayne came to me in a dream and told me all this shit about what he did in his life. And people will gobble it all, especially if you make, because so many people dislike me, make it as horrendous as possible. Okay? People will gobble it right up because we love terrible stories about people we don't like. And people we do like, oh, put them up on a pedestal and hide all the nasty shit they did.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want our heroes to be human.
Uh-huh.
They're like the gods.
So what do you like about this channel?
I've said a lot. What I like is that, well, I'm not a Paul fan,
Mm-hmm.
but he does say some things, and you read it, and it's like, well, yeah, that's a way of looking at it. I don't necessarily think he speaks for God or Jesus, but yeah, that's one way of looking at things. Yeah, I got no problem with that. And then you comment on it, and you're showing the actual text or one of the variants on the text and going through and saying, here's what it says and here's what I think. That's great. In the side chat, I'll ask, or in other channels, I'll say, well, where's that verse? Oh, well, it's in the Bible. Where? I'd like to know. Well, you should read it. I have read it, and that's why I'm asking questions, because I read it. I don't remember it saying that, but my memory isn't perfect. Refresh it. Tell me where it is, and I'll look it up,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe you're right. I had that with Richard. He's saying, well, Satan's a liar. Okay, where are the verses where Satan actually lies? Not where does somebody say he's a liar. Where in those scriptures is Satan actually lying? And then they'll bring up the garden. No, that's not Satan, that's a snake. Where does it specifically say Satan said blah, 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 and it is a lie? And they say, well, in the garden, he said the snake. Well, okay, we'll say the snake is Satan. Did he lie? Well, he said they would die. Well, if they didn't eat from the fruit of the tree of life, they were going to die anyway.
Right.
So did he lie? No, God said pretty much, you eat that tree, you're going to die that very day. It's poisonous, is basically what God told them, which is like telling a kid, don't touch that because, don't masturbate or you'll go blind, right?
Right.
You tell them all these lies to protect them. Okay, maybe that's my out for God. Why did he lie? Because sometimes you lie to your children to protect them, right? Or to keep them innocent. And so
Well,
it's like, well, did Satan lie? No, God did. Who's the bad guy? Not my call. I'm not God. I didn't write the story. I don't know who wrote the story. But yeah, Satan didn't lie. So we can eliminate Satan as the snake as a liar. Where else? Well, in the desert with Jesus, what lies did he say? Well, he said he would give him all these kingdoms. Well, you told me Satan is the God of this world, so all the kingdoms are his to give to Jesus, aren't they?
mm-hmm.
Did he lie? No. Or does the rest of that Bible verse that says or Satan is the God of this world, is that a lie? Which is it? You can't have it both ways. You can't cherry pick this verse and cherry pick this verse that contradict each other and say, well, I'm not using that one right now. Oh, I'll use this one now, and bounce back and forth. You can't have your cake and eat it too, in my book.
Mm-hmm. You have a
So,
book?
yeah. Actually, I wrote two pamphlets, I guess you would call them, not really books, two epistles in the 80s. Uh, One was a story about the Aztecs. It was kind of a polemic against religion and people who believe what the authorities tell them, and how the Aztecs, oh, to make the sun rise and the crops grow, we got to have human sacrifices. And if we don't, and that's why people did it, because they were afraid if we stop, we're going to die. That's nice barrel to be bent over. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and I wrote another one, which was kind of my Taoist philosophy. That's where I quote a lot of things. If you see me in the comments, I'll put in quotes and it'll be dash Lao Duan, Laotuan, Lao Tuan. which is a play on words. It's a play on Chinese Lao Tuan, which is kind of a play on old man. Uh, but if you read it in English real fast, loud one,
That's funny.
loud one, which was my adopted Taoist name. So if you see in the comments quotes and it's dash Lao Tuan, that's from my epistle, which I don't even know. Those I might have a copy in because I printed them out and I was handing them out like people like Chick tracts,
Yeah.
uh, and gave them out to people in Lancaster. Uh, and I printed them at home. Made the little pamphlets, made a little jig to staple them in the center and fold
So
them and
you're a
stuff.
pamphleteer.
Yeah. Uh, so a lot of those things that I say are out of that, and some of it that was in my epistles was stolen from other ideas from Taoist philosophers, Lao Tzu, Kwang Tzu, uh, that really impressed me and they make sense. And, and some of my own thoughts, which wasn't, people take it as I'm bashing the Bible or their Christianity. My quote was about the Tao Te Ching. And my quote is, if you need a book to teach you right from wrong, you need a hell of a lot more than a book. You
Yeah.
know? And that rubs some of the Christians who claim that atheists are all immoral and want to sin and all that shit. And it's like, no, there's a lot of decent people from all, other than Christians who are really nice people and do really good things. And there's Christians who are real shit pieces. That doesn't give you qualification. Saying I'm a Christian doesn't mean you're a good person. You might be, but you can't say, well, I'm a Christian, so I'm good, and atheists are bad because they're atheists. They have no morals. Well, yeah, if you really nail it down, a lot of atheists that I know have morals. They don't believe in murder, rape, adultery, cheating on your wife or husband. They have the same morals that most other cultures have.
Hmm.
But it's like, well, without the Bible, we'd be all murderers and rapists. No, no, people didn't go out raping and murdering before Christianity came around. You know, so that, but nobody wants to hear the other side. My way is the only way, and if you don't agree with me, you're wrong. And I don't buy that. I say this is my way. This is my beliefs, my thinking. I don't care if any believes it. I'm not out to evangelize anybody into the gospel of Dwayne.
So, do you have any beliefs about the origin of man and the destiny of mankind?
Well, in 1985, I don't even remember because the what happened was so important. I forget whether I was going to work, coming from work, going somewhere, coming back from somewhere, but I was on Clay Road in Lidditz, and
What state is that?
Pennsylvania,
Okay.
and I pulled off to the side of the road. Don't know why, but I pulled off to the side of the road and had what I call a revelation. I just
Hmm.
had this. Now, consider that I had stopped drinking and drugging 2 years prior. Okay, so, was this a flashback? Was this just my brain snapping into shape? Who knows? But I had what I call a revelation, and it was either a sunset or a sunrise, and it's like the sun is cresting and it's just this red thing. And I'm looking at it, and all of a sudden, I see the entirety of my universe, or the Earth, or our solar system, flash from the beginning to the end. And it starts in this ball of fire, and everything on Earth is so condensed and moving so fast, and then it ends in a ball of fire, and the revelation is over. And what I took from that is this is God, the real God, showing me the creation from beginning of end, what he sees, what his vision is, and that you are a part of this. This is me. This creation is me. This is God from beginning to end. You're a part of it. You're a part of God. Everything is a part of God. And you're just a little flash in the pan out of all of this. You're nothingness.
Mm-hmm.
It was humiliating to
Humbling
finally
or
realize that the world doesn't revolve around me. God isn't that concerned with me. There's a whole much bigger thing in God's universe than me, us, humanity, the mammals, the fish,
you sound like Paul.
and it was humiliating. And that's why I say, if you can't, that is was in my Taoist, and this was before anything. I was kind of into Taoist philosophy, rather not the religion. People got those two confused. But it was like, okay, and that fed into my writing. And my one favorite saying in my writings, which I stole from somebody else probably, but it goes, if you can't see God in a single blade of grass, you'll
Mm-hmm.
never hear his voice in the wind.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that is the most profound thing I ever said, and it isn't from me, but it is the way I see the world, God, everything. And to me, all the religions, all the theologies, they're like, you don't even see the reality all around you. It's like in the Gospel of Thomas, which is just Jesus said this about 75% of what's in Thomas is reiterated and expanded upon in the other Gospels in one way or another,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes outright copies. But in the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus says, when you see what is right in front of your face, nothing will be hidden from you.
Hmm.
That struck me so powerful. And the other one where he says, and it is longer than the saying in the Gospels. He said, Jesus said, the kingdom of God is within you and all around you, yet you don't see it.
Mm-hmm.
That struck me too. And that ties in with that vision I had. Yeah, you can't see the entirety. And when you do, it will humble you when you
Mm-hmm.
realize how insignificant you really are. Not that we aren't insignificant to each other, but in the grand scheme of the universe and God, what are we? You
I
know?
remember. I remember having that feeling one night, about 2 in the morning. I was in the Air Force at the time. I I was kind of a bad boy in the Air Force, and so they kicked me off of the day shift because I was an embarrassment. Because during the day shift, you have to be looking good, right? And
Yeah.
I would show up in fatigues that I just pulled out of the washing machine. They weren't even dried.
Yeah.
I looked like a pickle, and my hair was too long, and they kicked me off to the graveyard shift. And I was standing out there looking at the stars, and some fellow said, "See that third star in Orion's belt? That's a whole galaxy." I swear, DB, I had to lay down on the ground. I just thought, I don't know anything.
Yeah.
I'm
It's
very,
humbling, isn't it?
yeah.
And I don't think people like to be humbled. Even in the microcosm of a religion, Christianity will take, to say that, let's say, Jesus crucified. Could you do that? Would you do that? Would you suffer that pain and humiliation for what you believed in? Well, no. And I have another saying, when people ask me about what do I think about the gospel, I see four different gospels in the Bible. I see a whole bunch of other gospels that weren't included in the Bible because it didn't fit Catholic theology. But just the four in the Bible, I say Mark and John. I don't like Matthew and Luke for various reasons, but we'll take John and Mark, the two extremes. I would have been proud to be nailed to a cross alongside of Jesus in Mark.
Really?
Yes.
What did Mark and John have to say that would make you have that feeling?
Well, there's the second thing. I'll say the second half of that about John. The Jesus of John, I would have driven the nails into his wrist myself.
Really?
Yes. The Gospel of Mark, the Jesus of Mark, is human.
Mm-hmm.
Understands humans. Understands that the people around him just don't get him. His disciples are idiots. They'll tell a simple parable. What do you mean, Jesus?
Yeah.
You read it as its own story, not jamming all four together. Read it as its own story. Gospel of Mark is a, if you want to annoy people, you call it, it's a typical Greek tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Which the mythicists and everybody will go nuts on that. See, it's all mythology. No, the story of Jesus and Mark is a tragedy. It's a man who stands for his convictions, tries telling people about it, and is killed for it. We have them all the time. It's a fact of human nature. There are people who will die for what they believe in. Okay? To me, that's amazing. Yeah, if I walked beside him, I would probably say, Jesus, what do you mean by that? Explain that to me. I'm an idiot. And then he's killed because people don't understand him. That, to me, says a lot. The Gospel of John, Jesus is God and from the beginning, and he could do anything, and he runs the show and all this stuff. It's like, oh, I'll show you how much of a God you are, Jesus. Here, let me kill you.
Mm-hmm.
Killing a God is great in my book because I don't think God can be killed, either if he comes down in the flesh or whatever. No, you can't kill God. You can kill gods, but you can't kill the God, in my opinion. I could be wrong, maybe. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's the way I see it. And it's like, you want to play God? Well, then we'll kill you like the Greek gods were killed. But in Mark, he's not God. He doesn't play God. He doesn't claim to be God. He's just saying, my Father sent me. Okay? That's not saying you are the Father, does it? My Father sent me. I pray to my Father for guidance. I'm here to do my Father's bidding. Okay? That means a lot to me. But saying, I'm God and you got to do what I say, you got to believe me, or you're going to be damned to hell. No. That's playing God, and I don't like people who play God.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what Jesus is in John. That's why I say that. In Mark, he's a different. That's why I say, well, the Bible has 4 different Jesuses, and because you got 4 Gospels, and they're all tell a different biography of Jesus. And then you got the letters. Paul has a different Christ than James. James has a different Christ. Whoever wrote Hebrews has a different Christ. And that's another thing. A lot of the things that people think Paul wrote, he didn't. Or we have grave doubts that he did. We have 7 right now that everybody pretty much agrees. These were written by the same person. If we call him Paul, okay, we don't know whether they were written in the 1st century, before the fall of the temple. We have no idea. We have these letters, and as a historian, I could go through them and say, well, he's talking about these events in Antioch that other sources say, yeah, this happened at this time. But the guy could have been just, well, I'm going to bullshit everybody, and I'm going to say I was here during this, just like I could write a story about, my times in World War I and get all the details right. Does that mean I actually was there in World War I, or that I knew about World War I and wrote it afterwards? That's the problem with a lot of these things, and it's not just. And I don't pick on Christianity; I pick on everybody with this stuff. And it's like, well, yeah, that sounds like could Paul have been in the first century? Yeah. But I even get nailed by atheists and mythicists who pull Paul up as, well, see, Paul has the celestial Jesus, and Jesus is in the seventh heaven, and he was crucified in outer space and all this shit. Uh, well, who cares? Prove Paul even existed. Well, I don't have to. Scholars agree that he was this and that. I said, no, you prove it. You're supposed to be a historian, not a theologian. Richard Carrier is the person that I went after. And it's like, prove Paul existed. You're using his letters. You don't even know when the fuck they were written. But you're using his letters to disprove Jesus existed. Well, it's easy to believe. Well, we believe in a lot of historical people that we don't know about. I said, yeah, but we don't try and disprove that Caesar never existed using Socrates, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So you're trying to play historian, and you're doing what they condemn Christian apologists for doing with their, especially Calvinists and a lot of apologists, uh, having these presuppositional arguments. Well, we presuppose that our God, is the creator of the universe. Well, that's presupposition that you really should provide an argument to prove that or give a basis for anybody believing that other than yourself. Well, we don't have to because that's my presupposition. And Richard Carey does the presupposition that Paul was in the first century and he wrote these things and he knew all this stuff and he wasn't talking about a real Jesus. He was talking about Jesus in the sky. Well, how do you know that this Paul that you're talking about, his letters, the earliest copies we have are from 180 AD. How do you know they weren't written in 150 AD and that Paul was some lunatic writing down crazy shit? Maybe he was a troll and he was trolling these churches in the second century that were all over the place. And that he wrote to the Galatians, the church in Galatia in 140 AD, trolling them. We don't know. And that's my argument to Carrier. And that's why I did. We don't know these things. Now, theology and beliefs are a different thing. I can believe this. Why do you believe this? Well, based on this, that, and the other thing. Okay, I'm good with that. When you claim it's history, no, you're barking up the wrong tree. That's like trying to piss on my shoes and tell me it's raining.
Mm-hmm.
But people don't. Well, maybe it's because people don't know history. What are they taught in high school? Well, history is the stuff you're going to make you read and memorize in this book. Except you have some history teachers that step outside of the book and say, "Oh, the book says this, but look at this other stuff we have." You know,
Right.
But that's rare in American education. But when you get to college, sometimes it's a different story because college professors, a good college professor, could go to any college. My American Studies professor, his first lesson was, and this was an undergraduate class, American Studies, he said, forget all the bullshit you were taught in high school.
Yeah, like that's possible to do.
Yeah, but it was like, don't come at me with the bullshit you learned in high school. I'm a professor. I actually studied this stuff far more than the people who wrote your history book or your history teachers. I'm a professor. And that's basically what he's saying, you don't have to believe me, but I'm going to give you some information that you'd never heard before. And where some of the stuff that you were taught is bullshit and wrong. But anyways, later on in the course, he got an offer from Oxford University. This was at Penn State. He got an offer from Oxford University to go teach there. So this guy was no dummy, and that's like, this was at the end of class, and I'm like, this is cool. This is what real education is,
Mm-hmm.
And during the middle of the course, he brought in his mountain dulcimer. What part of history was that? It might have been 1800 somewhere. He's talking about Appalachian here, and he brought in his mountain dulcimer. played a song for us. He goes, this is music from the Appalachians in 1870. On a little dulcimer. And that was really cool. It's like, yeah, bring it to life. And as a teacher later, this is the kind of thing I brought to my student. Here's reality. Make it real. This is not just words on the blackboard or words in a book. This is reality. Unfortunately, in comp sci, I had a shitload of equipment, and the kids would be doing stuff, and they'd try all sorts of excuses. Where's your paper? Well, my computer died. My computer isn't good enough to run word processor. I'm like, you realize that we put a man on the moon with the computer equivalent of a Commodore 64, and you can't do your homework because of your computer? And then they're like, well, Mr. B, what really happened? And then I'd get the real story. You pull this little excuse out. And I was like, well, my mom was surfing the internet, and she wouldn't let me on to write my report. And I'm like, well, okay, but you had like a week. Was your mom on the internet for a week straight? No. So you could have done it. Yeah, I put it off. Okay, I understand that. I'll give you another couple of days, but whatever grade I'm giving you, you're losing 5 points. They'd be like, okay, that's fair. And it was not to punish them it was trying to impress upon them, you're going to be responsible for what you do. You're not getting a free ride, because life isn't about free rides for most of us.
How to be happy even if you don't get your way.
Yeah. And we want it to be our way, but when it isn't our way, we throw a hissy fit. I do that. I get pissed off. I get upset.
I've been meaning to talk to you about that. Straighten up. So have you ever gotten any letters from students from your past that says, thank you so much?
Yes. My students are like, in class, are like, can we friend you on Facebook or MySpace, or can I have your email? And I'm like, after you turn 18 and graduate.
Mm-hmm.
And I have students. Yeah. And I have students
Aren't you clever?
on my Facebook that friended me on Facebook, both from high school and college, that I kept my promise. They're like, friend request, and I recognize the name. They're like, I remember him or her. Oh, sure, follow.
Yeah, I say, did you ever get any letters? I'm telling my age there, but
I got letters from parents when I was teaching, thanking me. I had parents come in person after their student graduated, thanking me for their advice, and I had parents thanking me for being honest with them. Like, I had one student who was high level autistic, and I was honest with him. I said, he likes computers, and I think this is as far as he can grasp to do this as a living. And that was computer repair and servicing. And they're like, well, can't he be, like a network technician? I don't think he's capable. I'm not ruling it out, but right now, coming out of high school, some of my students are capable of that. But it's no. Strive for this goal first, and when he sees that and he's been in this, got a job and doing this for a while, maybe further education, online, in college, all different ways of learning comp sci. Maybe further that way, but let's take it one step at a time. Okay. And he graduated with the certificate in computer repair and servicing, along with his high school diploma, which will get you a job at Starbucks. And he got a job at not the Geek Squad, but at a retail store, taking care of computers and stuff like that. And they were more than happy that a child that they thought would never be able to take care of himself at least now had a job that he could take care of himself when they died. What a greater gift to your parents, to a
Wow.
parent, than saying,
Uh-huh.
hey, you know what? I'm going to help your kid to be able to live without you.
That's great. That's great.
And that to me is what my goal in teaching as a vocational technical instructor was all about. Not to teach everything about computers so you can sit in your basement and play Nintendo for the rest of your life. It was so that you understand these things so you can go out and work in this field and make a living.
Hmm.
And if you don't like working on this stuff, then go find another trade. I'm not here to make you an intellectual as far as computers go. I'm here to give you the skills for today's uh, trade and job availability in this field.
Hmm.
I'm here to get you on a road to having a life. I'm like, whoa, what do you do? It's like you can change your mind anytime. I started off graduating from high school with a vocational diploma in electrical work. And then I got an apprenticeship as a hydraulic technician. And then I got a job as a research and development technician for Sikorsky aircraft in hydraulics and pneumatics. And then and it's like, and then because of my knowledge, I left Connecticut and Sikorsky's and I moved to Pennsylvania and got jobs as industrial electrician because they liked that I could also do their hydraulics and pneumatics, which they loved in maintenance. It killed 3 jobs with one guy.
I asked you if you got any good feedback from your students, and you told me about parents thanking you. One of my daughters was in college here in Utah, and this whole place is kind of has the feeling like it's being run by the Mormons anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And so my other daughter came into town, they're both adults, right? And so I picked her up at the airport with, so I had both daughters in the car and we're driving along. And I said, Hannah's in college now. And what's really weird? You want to hear a weird story? I said, yeah, at Hannah's college at the parent-teacher conference meeting, just out of nowhere, all the parents and the teachers started doing a conga line dance. It was just really weird. And my daughter that blew into town, she says, yeah, that is kind of weird. But what's even more weird is that they would have a parent-teacher conference at college.
Yeah.
But I got away with it because of the culture of Salt Lake City, being so Mormon.
Yeah. And the parent-teacher conferences I had, I think there was only maybe 2 parents in 17 years that had a problem with me.
In high school? Did
Yeah.
you have any? You didn't have them in college, though?
No, but I did get, every time I taught a course at college, the students had to fill out, I had to leave the room. The students would elect a spokesperson, representative. They would fill out my score as a teacher, put them in a sealed envelope, and take it, and the representative would take that to the dean of the college.
Have you ever heard of John Taylor Gatto?
Mm-mm.
He won Teacher of the Year award in New York City, as I recall, 7 years in a row.
Wow.
And he was his whole time as a teacher, he kept trying to bring in reform, educational reform, and he got beat up left and right about the matter,
Mm-hmm.
And finally he just threw up his hands and quit and wrote a book on why you should homeschool, and then wrote another book called Dumbing Us Down. And he made the argument that our current school system is not designed to create geniuses, but to make good employees, just good workers that don't cause trouble. And then he went on to write another book about the history of American education, and that Webster and his pals went over to Prussia and saw what they were doing with their education system and brought it back to the United States in the 1800s, late 1800s. And the Prussian system was definitely not to create geniuses or great statesmen or great intellectuals, but just to create good workers, and that's what they brought
Mm-hmm.
back to this country. And so he made a name for himself, with his rebellion against the current educational system.
Yeah.
And I just thought you might have heard of him, John Taylor Gatto.
No, but that's interesting. You know why I was forced to retire? One of the excuses they came up for forcing me to retire. My students had too much reading and writing in my class. That was the high school.
So
So
you would get the same feeling as Gatto.
yeah, it's like, what part of education don't you understand? I've been doing this for 17 years. This
Hmm.
is how you teach comp sci. There's a lot of reading and a lot of writing. And I'm preparing my students for college if they so desire to go to a real college for a real, like comp sci. Uh, yeah, this is what it's about. And I told my students and my parents that. Oh, it's not good enough for administration. We had 2 students complain this year, and their parents are upset that you're making them read and write.
Well, kick him out of class.
Oh,
That'll
you
make him
can't.
happy.
Yeah, but that was the excuse. Too much right. Well, and you don't lecture enough. Well, lectures after 15 minutes, children stop listening. Adults stop listening after 10. You don't stand there and lecture. Mm. But some of your students are oral learners. That, which I later researched, and it's like, no, or they're visual learners or oral learners. No, the best learn educational method is reading and applying what you read, thinking about it, right?
Hmm.
Especially in the sciences. It's like, how do I use a microscope? Well, just pick it up and stick your eye over here, play around with it. No, we're not even going to give you the microscope. Just here's what a microscope looks like. Here's a picture of one. Did you
Right,
get
right.
it? And I'm going to tell you all about a microscope. Now you know how to use one, right? No. How about here, read this operator's manual for this, scientific microscope before you touch it. And then I'm going to have little lessons where, okay, prepare your slide, follow these directions,
Hmm. Hmm.
lay the slide on a clean desk, use the eyedropper to take the stuff you want to look at and drop it on there, and then lay the cover over that. Okay, do you get that part? Okay, can you do that repeatedly without reading the instructions? Uh-huh. Okay. Now, here's how we put it on the microscope. See those 2 little clips?
Man, what a
You
time waster,
slide
huh?
it underneath. Can you
Yeah.
do that? That's how you teach. Read the instructions, which is the first thing I teach my students. First day of class, I write on the blackboard RTFM in big letters, big capital letters. RTFM. And they go, what's that? It's read the effing manual. What do you mean? If you don't want to read the manual, you're in the wrong trade.
Hmm.
You know? You gotta read specification sheets just for computer repair. And assembly. You gotta read the specification sheets for all the parts that you're putting together. Let alone putting them together physically.
So, how did you feel when they booted you out?
Uh, well, I was about suicidal,
Oh, God.
and I went to my doctor, and
Rejection is hard, huh?
she's like, just quit. You don't need this shit. Do you want to be dead or retired? I'm like, retired? Says, well, I'll write you a medical thing so you not only retire, because I wasn't eligible for retirement at the time. Well, I kind of was. He said, I'll write you up a thing so you can get medical disability pay, which she did. She says, she was my doctor for like 10 years, and well, maybe 7 or so. But she's like, you've been through too much. She said, I was about to tell you after. Well, she's the one who helped me through my 9 months of chemo. She says, I don't think you should have gone back to teaching after that. I think you should have just taken a medical retirement, and that would have been it. Uh, but you're stubborn, and well, you had to find that out for yourself because the the disease and the chemo took a lot out of me. I don't deny that, and I should have retired. It wasn't not because of administration or anything. I wasn't 100% like I would have, like I was before, and that wasn't fair to my students. Fuck the administration. Fuck me. It wasn't fair to my students. But I pushed on for another year and a half.
Hmm. Well, I'm sorry to hear that you went through that.
Yeah, it's, it's water under the bridge now. Can't go back. Like I tell everybody, when you buy me that time machine, I'll happily go back and do all this stuff that I should have done, that I could have done, that we want
Do
to
you have any
know.
problems with cancer lately?
Well, it wasn't cancer. Actually, I had hepatitis C,
Oh, is
and I
that
went
just as
through.
bad?
Yeah, uh, I was diagnosed when I was in college in around '95, I think it was, and they diagnosed me because I was sick. I had to take a semester off from classes, and I had to contact all my professors saying, I am deathly ill. I can't barely get across campus to get something to eat. How much will I be penalized for attendance? And they're like, all of them said, I know your situation, and if you can just get the notes from somebody, find other kid students in your classes to you know, tell you, get the books for you and all that stuff for the course. Keep up to date, read the notes, lecture notes, which are at Penn State, they were available. You had to buy them at the bookstore, but you could get the semester notes and half semester notes. And they'd say, do all the stuff you can and just show up for midterms and finals, and we'll be okay. And we'll just grade you on how you did in the midterms and finals, nothing else. And I managed A's and B's from being bedridden for a semester. And that was 93. And by 98, they put me on, after I graduated, they put me on interferon, which was the only thing they knew that would, at the time, that would. They didn't even know hepatitis C existed until the mid 90s. And they put me on interferon for a year because they thought that was the only thing we know that even works for anybody with hepatitis C. And I did a injection of interferon every other day for a year, and it put it in remission. And then it came back, and 5 years, 6 years later, they put me on interferon and what's it called? The one that's being tested for COVID, remdesivir. So it's interferon and remdesivir, and
You've taken remdesivir?
yeah. And after 3 months, the interferon made me sick. It was like having a cold all the time. The remdesivir made me feel like I was dying, and I managed through 3 months of it and said, no, I can't continue on with
I've
this.
heard bad things about remdesivir.
Yeah, we hear a lot of stuff about everything now that everybody's paying attention to everything, and it's like, no, remdesivir been around a while. And then in 2014,
So, how's your
uh,
health now?
I'm pretty good now. The Hep C is gone. 2014, my doctor said, uh, this stuff has been progressing in you, and you're getting worse and worse, and you're at the point where we need to cure this or you're going to die from it real shortly.
Hmm.
So it was like, and she's like, they just came up with a new treatment for hepatitis that is really effective, but it's horrendous. It takes daily injections, like 24 pills a day. And it was basically the remdesivir, the interferon, which are both used in chemotherapy, and another drug that Merck came out with, which was designed for treating cancer and AIDS, is what they were working on. And then they found, oh, hey, this works against hepatitis C, and that cocktail, chemical cocktail, which is what chemotherapy is, a chemical cocktail, that is, we're going to, in the process of trying to kill this shit, we're going to almost kill you.
Mm-hmm.
And I went through that for 9 months. At the end, I almost died. They had to give me another injection, daily injection stuff for keeping my red blood cell count up.
Wow.
And I did it all from home because she's like, you need to be in the hospital. I hate hospitals. Well, do you know how to give yourself these injections? I said, yeah, I did the interferon injections before. I know all about how to do that. And taking pills is easy. She goes, you're going to feel like shit. And she says, it's going to build up. And after like 3 months, I was like, I could barely get up. And she's like, you need to take medical leave. I'll fill out the paperwork, get medical leave from school. You can't make it through the year. So I did that. So 9 months I was on medical leave and stayed in my house. And near the end, some of the teachers would come visit me, bring me snacks and shit, and see how I was doing, cheer me up and stuff. And after after I was cured, which was the middle of the summer, I went back in September. And my one friend, teacher, Frank, he goes, we all had bets on whether you would, not money bets, but, gentlemen's bets on whether you were going to die or not, because you looked like you were dead when we'd come to visit you. Which, if you see people on chemo, it's not a pretty sight. And it's worse for them being inside of that unpretty sight.
Have you ever heard of the GAPS diet?
No.
It has to do with gut something or another, right? And it's being promoted by this scientist or doctor named Natasha McBride. And her theory is that all of our diseases start in the gut. And if you can heal the gut, you'll heal up a lot of other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So she's got this list of foods that you should eat and foods that you should not eat. And she is getting amazing results with it, to the point where she even recommends and has had good success with the GAPS diet for autistic children that are severely damaged by vaccines. And they come out of it to a great degree of this problem. And anyway, so if you look at the GAPS diet, it's very much like the paleo or the caveman diet or the keto diet, very much similar, but with a few different emphasis on things. But I thought I'd throw that out there. That Natasha McBride.
Natasha McBride. GAPS diet. I remember that.
GAPS.
GAPS. Let God of the gaps.
Right.
During the 9 months, 6 months of it, I had no appetite. And I told my doctor, I don't feel like eating.
Did you lose a lot of weight?
You're losing weight. He goes, you need to keep your weight up. And I'm like, well, I don't feel like eating. He goes, what do you like to eat? What do you make for yourself for snacks other than chocolate and shit like that? You know what I really like is toast with butter and peanut butter.
Mm-hmm.
She goes, oh, you eat? Well, that's good. Eat those.
I think peanuts are out of the GAPS diet, and so is wheat, all kinds of wheat. She cast that out.
Then she said, and if you don't feel like the whole sandwich, on days that you don't feel like eating, eat a teaspoon or two of peanut butter because you like it.
Peanut butter is out according to the GAPS diet. So you're stuck with eating a spoonful of butter.
Yeah. But it was like, didn't kill me, and I made it through, and I'm cured now, and I still like peanut butter. Mm-hmm. I still like chocolate. I like tuna fish. Nancy makes all kinds of stuff, most of which I like and don't. I hope she's not listening. I'll deny that under oath. But yeah, so yeah, I've never followed diet. My dad never followed the diet, and he maintained his weight and health for till he died in his 80s.
Everyone actually follows a diet.
A diet, yeah. My dad was on a seafood diet. He saw
Right.
food, he'd eat it.
I was on the Pop-Tart diet for years. And that's a figure of speech, of course. And I put on a hell of a lot of weight. And, when you look in the mirror every day, you don't see it
Mm-hmm.
because the weight goes all over your body. And so you day by day by day, you get used to seeing your own face. And so you just don't see that you're packing it on. You
Mm-hmm.
just know that you have to buy a new pant size every so often. But one thing that cured me was I was out early summer on the porch barefoot, and I hadn't seen my feet in a long time because you're all bundled up in the cold weather, right? And my feet were swollen up to where I didn't even recognize them. I'm going, what the hell? So I knew I had to get serious about that, and so I stumbled into the caveman diet, and I lost about 40, 50 pounds.
Hmm.
And what attracted me to the caveman diet, and I want to remind you, it's similar to the GAPS diet. And so if anybody wants to do any research, they should do it on the so-called GAPS diet. But what attracted me was that I had always been afraid of diets just because of that mentality that you're starving yourself, that comes
Yeah.
with the idea of being on a diet. I didn't want to feel hungry. And the thing about these two, GAPS and caveman or paleo, is that you eat as much as you want. It's just that you stop eating wheat and grains and so forth. You
Mm-hmm.
figure it out, and you stop eating peanuts too. And I learned that when you eat the popular American diet, no matter what you call it, Pop Tart diet or just what everybody does eat, diet soda and so forth, they they eat a lot of sugars, whether they acknowledge it or not. And it turns out that sugars kind of make you hungry
Mm-hmm.
more. But if you eat the fats, the fatty organs, and butter and avocado, it turns out that fat in your stomach releases a hormone called CCK, which sends a message instantly up to your brain that tells you that you're not hungry anymore. So you don't feel hungry, so it doesn't feel like a diet, a so-called diet. And I also learned that cancers love sugars and cancers hate fats.
Hmm.
So, and over the many years of just, casually reading the newspapers before the internet was ever around, I would see these articles at least once a year about the oldest man or the oldest woman in the United States. And so I'd read the article about them, and that they were 115 years old or so. It turns out that almost every one of them said that they ate chicken skins every day. They love chicken skins, and I was always thought that's the worst part. That's where all the fat is. You don't want to eat that because we want a low fat diet, right? Because we're all fat. But no, these old people, 115 years old, they were all skinny, and they bragged on eating chicken skins and fats and sausage, right? And smoking cigars and having a shot of whiskey before they went to bed. So it seemed once I read the theory behind the caveman diet and why it's more beneficial for you, I said, oh, that makes sense with all those old people I read about. And then it dawned on me that at the old folks' home, you never see any fat people there. They always die off too soon to get to the old folks' home. It's always skinny people that are at the old folks' home.
Hmm.
So it would make sense, not being a scientist, actually cutting into a body and seeing what sugar does. But here's something I found to be fascinating when I started studying all the material for the caveman diet. They said don't eat wheat and or any type of grains because cavemen they weren't farmers. They were on the run all the time, either chasing their food or running away from creatures that thought they were food, right? And so they weren't farmers. They ate meat and fruit and vegetables, as they could catch it as they ran along. And so after I digested this theory, hey, get it? Digested this theory?
Mm-hmm.
I stumbled on this PBS thing, this Discovery Channel thing about the Iceman from Switzerland.
Let's see.
Yeah, they found this 5,000-year-old man because the ice melted back and he'd been there for 5,000 years, they guess. They brought him into town and did an autopsy on him. And I thought, oh, I'm going to watch this and see if this caveman diet fits in with what they discover here. So they're doing an autopsy and they say, oh, look at this. He had arthritis. And the caveman diet people, they say, wheat will give you arthritis.
Mm-hmm.
So they're still cutting on him and they say, oh, look at this. He had heart disease. And the caveman diet people say, wheat will give you heart disease too.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're still cutting on him and they can't find his stomach because when he died, he rolled over on a boulder. So he was bent over. So it pushed his stomach out of the way and they couldn't find it in the normal place. Toward the end of the autopsy, they found his stomach and they cut it open and it was filled with wheat. I said, oh my God, that makes perfect sense according to what I just studied and read,
Well, there was a lot of stuff in his nickname for the Iceman is Utsi, because he was found in the Utzwall of the Alps.
Uh-huh.
And there's a lot of interesting things that came out of that. Other than that, that he had a copper axe pushed what we previously believed was the earliest metallurgy in Europe, pushed it back 2,000 years.
You mean push it back? Okay, not forward.
They thought the metallurgy wasn't popular in Europe until 2000 BC. He pushed it back because he's like 3000 BC. It pushed it back 1,000 years.
Wow.
That he had wheat in his stomach.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't from the north.
He must have been a farmer.
The south. Yeah, he was down where they could grow wheat.
Mm-hmm.
If he was from the north, his stomach would have been filled with rye.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can't grow wheat that successfully on the other side of the Alps.
Well, they weren't making this caveman diet analysis. I was filling in.
Yeah, well, that's a great thing too. Look what we learned from this, and it also showed that there was, because of some of the implements that he had, they knew where they came from, or correlated. Like he had, the bow was made from this kind of wood, which only grows in this region, things like that. It gave us light on a whole bunch of things going on in Europe, and it showed that 3000 BC, there was trade across the Alps, north and south. That people say, oh, well, the Alps stopped everything. Well, it didn't stop, in 200 BC, when, what's his name, took the elephants across the Alps to invade Rome. Hannibal, yeah. Mind block on the name. Didn't stop Hannibal from taking elephants across the Alps to get into northern Italy, Rome. The Alps aren't the mountains aren't the obstacles that everybody thinks they are. How did people get over there? No, they didn't know. They didn't know anything about boats. Well, how did people cross the Rhine River? Did they all swim in these migrations? Well, they must.
When was the Bronze Age?
Well, the Bronze Age, you have to go by areas, because the Bronze Age occurred at the span of what we call the Bronze Age is different in the Middle East than it is in Europe, than it is in what we call Russia now, than it is in China. Each kind of groups didn't know about these things that the others did and didn't implement them. So the Bronze Age in the Middle East ended with their Iron Age, which was about We figure around 1200 BC, the time of the alleged David, and we place it there because there are inferences of iron, rather not steel, but iron being used in the Middle East about that time. But we don't get it in the north of the Middle East, like into Turkey and uh, Eastern Europe, Western Russia, the steppes. We don't get that until the Celtic peoples are around 500 BC,
Hmm.
which is when the Celts really became dominant in the area because they had iron chariots,
Oh,
which even the Romans didn't know about.
I stumbled on an article some years ago about the Bronze Age, and they were doing metallurgical analysis of the bronze from that time period, and there was some combination of copper and silver in it that they said only could come from Michigan.
Yeah, yeah,
Which,
because we
which
can't
would,
extract the alloys, and through
but to think
chemical
that there
through
was
analysis consent.
a trade going on all the way from Michigan into the Mediterranean area, that
Yep.
we don't. There's so much we don't know.
Yeah, and we don't know, and a lot of people don't want to know because their heritage, their culture can't have that happening.
Hmm.
It's like I was just reading about the metallurgy in South America, which North America, the native peoples in North America pretty much had no clue or didn't care about metals. Okay, they could get by with stones and carving shit out of buffalo bones or whatever, or deer bone in the Northeast. But in South America, in Peru, they found copper items, which weren't really copper. They were alloys of copper, which is exactly what bronze is. So they
Hmm.
actually had bronze things, and they did analysis on. They were alloying copper with all kinds of things to make alloyed tools that they could carve stone with.
Hmm.
And when we said, well, how did they make these with just stone tools? They didn't. They had bronze chisels, which will hold an edge because they knew how to alloy the copper to have it hold an edge. If you use regular copper and try to use it as a chisel, it goes dull real quick. But if you alloy it with other things, it becomes extremely hard. And you can use it as a chisel and you can sharpen it to a fine point, do all this stuff that they were finding out. And some of the alloys didn't come from Peru, they came from Mexico, from the Gulf areas, and some of the jade that is in South America, they traced to Florida.
Hmm.
And it's like, you mean we don't have any evidence of the Aztecs in Florida? No, we don't have any evidence of the Siamese in Canada either. What's your
Hmm.
point? Can they trade? Yeah, sure. I'm sure Canadians buy stuff from Singapore. Does that mean that they have Singaporean culture? No, they just buy the shit from them. Does Singapore
Yeah,
have Canadian culture? No, they just sold the shit to the Canadians.
I just thought it was amazing that there was a trade route from Michigan all the way over to the Middle East somehow.
Well, because they had boats. We
Boats
know they had
and
boats
a system.
and a system. Yeah, because where there's money to be made, we'll find a way. We'll improve it. Well, we had one ship go up there, and then the guys trekked off and found the rivers, and then they carted their boats over to the lakes, and oh, they had to start down below the falls there, but they got over to Michigan, and then they got all this stuff and traded whatever the hell it was, brought this stuff back, and then came back and sailed back across the ocean. That was pretty cool. How do we do that en masse? There's money to be made here. How do we make lots of it? Well, we need to come up with an idea on how to do this. Maybe make paths from where the rivers end, where the lakes start. Maybe make some paths there so we can get through easily and transport a lot of this shit.
It's
It's like,
amazing what can come out of the
yeah,
mind
it's
of
like, who
man.
would have ever thought that silk was so valuable that they'd have a silk road from China to Europe?
Right.
Oh, how did they do that? Because there was money to be made,
Hmm.
where there was food to be hunted, where were all these. You can go out in the woods and find deer trails. You know what they'll lead you to? All the shit the deer like to eat and where they like to sleep. Right?
Right.
What's their motive for doing that? They like to eat. What do people like to do? Make money. I like to get rid of, trade this stuff that's all over the place here. Take it over here where they don't have any, but they like that stuff, and trade it for the stuff that they have all sorts of. That is people like over here, and we trade it back and forth. And in each transaction, everybody who's in the trade thing is making profit.
One
We
would
like
hope.
that as humans.
So where do you see the
So,
world headed right now?
same place it's always been. Nowhere. There will be wars and rumors of wars. There will be earthquakes and volcanoes. There will be famines and pestilence. Duh, that's all of human history.
Hmm.
That's probably dinosaur history. They're probably having Tyrannosaurus rexes killing each other over the hunting grounds for the Dimetrodons or something. I mean, this is nothing new. It's like, want a great prophecy? I prophesy. There will be wars. There will be famines. There will be pestilence. There's going to be earthquakes. There's going to be landslides. There's going to be horrendous winters. There's going to be horrendous summers of drought and famine. Yeah, that's an easy prophecy, especially if I don't put a date on it. Uh, you know, 10 years from now, all my prophecies will have come true, and will I be hailed as a great prophet because I said the obvious?
You're already hailed as an ace theologian.
Mm-hmm. Which annoys. Who was it on the chat the other day? Said, "Well, I got a diploma from Ace theologian," and I said, "I got a red shot." And like, why do we play these games? Who gives a shit? I mean, I like you. I disagree with a lot of stuff. Uh, I think you're off left field somewhere, but at least you're somewhere in the ballpark, as opposed to some of the guys on your channel that I think are. Are you even in the ballpark here? Or are we talking about football?
Right.
uh, but there's certain people I like, and it's not because, oh, I like your theology, I like your belief, or you're a fellow believer, and blah blah. It's like, no, you can have a reasonable conversation without flipping out. That's kind of rare. And you don't get upset when I'm like, well, which was thing when I first found your channel and you're going on about Paul. I'm like, why should I take Paul as an authority? And he didn't freak out on me. Well, he's in the Bible, so it must be God's word. I'm like, because you don't have to. I do. I like a lot of what Paul says, and I try and live by Paul's words because I believe them. Fine, that's great. And he didn't tell me I have to. That's a big difference. And that's the thing that evangelists don't understand, I think, that yelling at an atheist or a person from another faith and telling them all about the Bible is as useless as a Muslim coming to a Christian and say, look at the Quran, it's the word of God. Is that going to work? No. You can't use the book. Use something else to get them to understand where you're coming from and how your way of life is an improvement over their way of life. Because that's where you're going to get these people. Most of the atheists that these people are railing against a lot of times, they don't believe in an afterlife. They don't believe in your God. Why are you going to tell them about? Well, if you don't believe, you're going to hell. And they're like, that's like telling me if I don't believe in Santa, I'm not getting any Christmas presents. I don't get Christmas presents anymore, and I don't believe in Santa. Never did. Well, well,
Never did.
well. Santa is going to spank you.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't work. So you got to put it in terms that that person understands. Like if you want to convert a Muslim, you've got to talk not how Jesus is God. They have Jesus in their thing. Pick out the Jesus stories in the Quran and use them to kind of, yeah, we're talking about the same guy here, right? And don't say, well, Allah is a foreign god. No, we understand that Allah is Arabic, just for God, just like Allah is Aramaic for God, just like Ele is, or El is Hebrew for God, just like El is Canaanite for God. It's like we're talking about the creative force, or as I like to call it, the creative and motive force of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Are we all in agreement? Yeah. Are the Muslims atheists? No. Are Jews atheists? No. Are Christians atheists? No. Are Mormons atheists? No. I don't know, but uh, I'm guessing they believe in the creator. So we're all talking about the same thing. Let's start there. Instead of jumping the gun. That's why a lot of these apologists are like, well, the Kalam cosmological argument proves God. No, it doesn't. And you can't jump from, even if it does, you can't from the Kalam cosmological argument proves that there is a God. Okay, well, I'll grant you that. So what? Well, therefore, Jesus is God. No, you can't take that jump. It's like, I have a dog. Well, it must be Rin Tin Tin. No, you can't jump from that. Right?
Yeah. Right.
And so you start, it's like, what do we have in common here? Well, let's talk about things we agree with. Was Jesus, with a Muslim, I've talked to my neighbors about Jesus. They're like, yeah, he was a great prophet. Okay, prophet, you want to call him prophet? I don't care what you call him. You can call a skunk a cat for all I care. It doesn't change what it is. Okay, and we'll have talk. Oh, Jesus.
Pepe Le Pew got that confusion going
Yeah,
on.
yeah. Pepe Le Pew was not only gender confused, he was species confused. But, we can talk about, what did Jesus say in the Quran? Well, according to the Quran, he says this. Oh, that's cool. That lines up with what, the Gospel of so-and-so says about Jesus. Oh, that's cool. Well, the Gospels are a bastardization of the truth. Yeah, okay. I'll agree that it's a bastardization, but your little book written 600 years later isn't helping me out with shit either. So, let's stick to the thing. And my neighbor, he doesn't bring up the Quran says it. He's like, well, I believe this, which is great. I love when people say, I believe this. And when people say, well, I know about things that are unknowable, that really annoys me. Do you mean you know, or is that just your way of saying, I believe, and giving your beliefs more authority than they're actually worth?
Mm-hmm.
Which, there are things that I do know. I know that in the KJV from 1883, the copies of the King James Version had the Apocrypha in them. The Apocrypha was removed in 1885 from the King James Bibles. Some people don't know because they'll bring that up when somebody bashes, well, not so much anybody, but when KJV only is, come at me with that, I'll say, oh, you're believing the KJV. Yeah, well, why don't you believe this? Why don't you like this story? Well, that's not in my Bible. I said, you realize Bell and the Dragon were in the KJV until 1885? Nuh-uh. Paul and I think it was Paul and Thecla is in the Apocrypha. Maybe not. But that was in the KJV until 1885. So you're saying that your God only wrote shit in the last 150 years? then they get trapped in, why do you believe? Because I speak English and it's the only one I. Well, that makes sense to me. Nancy says that too. Well, I like the KGB. I like uh, eSword. I like Strong's uh, compendium because I can understand and I can cross reference things and get some like, okay, that makes sense. I accept that. And I just told her this morning, when I was younger, if I believed the Bible was the Word of God, I would have learned ancient Hebrew and read the Dead Sea Scrolls in the original languages. I would have learned ancient Greek and read the earliest manuscripts of the New Testament. I wouldn't be relying on some asshole's translation into English declared by some king 500 years ago. The hell? I got the originals. That's like ever hear people say, "Well, I like the book better than the movie."
Right.
Right? Or I like the original. I do that with one of my favorite movies, All Quiet on the Western Front. I
Mm-hmm.
love the original black and white film. The
Mm-hmm.
remake I didn't like.
Right.
I want the original. Let me read the original. Maybe I won't like it either. Maybe I'll say, well, I read the original. I've read the book and I like the movie better. Lord of the Rings. I read the books, love the books, but the movie from Peter Jackson. Oh man, that just blew me away. That was great. And I was like, would I read the books again? No, but I'll watch the movies again. So it's like, why aren't I allowed to read the originals? Why do you hate? It's like, why do people who are into the NIV hate the KJV? It's like, no, they're both approximations. Even the yeah, can't say it, concordant version. It's somebody's translation. Is it good? Yeah, you can get something out of it. Sure. I could get something out of watching the remake of the uh, All
Red
Quiet on the
Dawn.
Western Front, but why can't I look at the other movie too? Oh, don't dare look at that one. Don't compare the two. Why not? And if you like the one better than the other, God bless you.
And your story about that sunrise or sunset on the side of the road, and the revelation that came to you, that it sounded like what Paul is teaching, that all is out of God, through God, and for God.
Yeah, maybe Paul had a similar revelation at some point. I don't know. I can only relate my experience, which it could have been a revelation from God. It could have been the dope pouring out of my system after 2 years. Revelation that, hey, you know what? I don't drink anymore. Shit happens. I can't go to the bar and get fucking snot faced drunk. Uh, I got to deal with it.
Right.
Uh, maybe that was it, and maybe it had nothing. I should have dug deeper and related it to other things. But the perception that I had was this is a revelation of this is the universe, and in the grand scheme of things, I ain't shit.
Right.
And you could make me president of the universe as a human being, I still ain't shit.
Mm-hmm.
Because there was a lot before me. There's going to be a lot after I'm dead and gone, and I can't tell the future. Although I saw it, it's just this big blur, and I'm a little tiny somewhere in that blur. That took maybe the whole experience. Maybe it was 5 minutes. Condense the entire universe from beginning to end in 5 minutes. It's a blur. That's my perception of it. And somewhere in there, I am. And I'm a part of it. It's just like your
Mm-hmm.
fingernails. What's so great about clipping your finger? Well, that little fingernail was you. It's a part of you. Your fingers are a part of you. Can you amputate it? Yeah. But that little dead thing laying over there, that fingernail clipping or that amputated limb, it's you.
And
And
if
you
you leave it on
can't
the
deny
floor,
it.
you will get in trouble.
Yeah, but it's still you. And it's a continuum. Someone mentioned everything's connected. Yes, I agree with that. When Paul said all is from God, all in all, okay, I can grasp that.
I can't,
I
but
might
I
not
love it.
grasp it why you do the way you do or anybody else does, but it makes sense to me. That's that blur is the all in all. And you as a human being can't see it in its entirety, understand it, other than it's a big goddamn blur. And you got a chance to be this little speck in it and experience it, good, bad, or indifferent. You got X amount of time to experience that. And you want more. That isn't enough for you. God gave you, a persona to experience this universe and all its good, bad, and indifferent to you. And you got that gift. And it wasn't enough for you that you want an eternity of it. You think you deserve an eternity of it. Maybe not. Maybe God said, you know, I gave you what I did. Be happy with that. The parties might be over. I threw a great bash here, invited you in, and you had a great time, and the party's coming to an end, and it's somebody else's turn. Too damn bad. I can deal with that. A lot of people can't. They can't. And that's what I think. A lot of people, maybe it's because I've faced death several times, contemplated suicide a lot of times. And it's like, I'm not afraid of death. I just don't want it. I'm afraid of the pain. I'm not afraid of being old, never was. It's when you're old, you can't do the shit that you did when you were 20.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I don't like. If I had all my strength and vigor that I had when I was 20, let me have that until I'm 100 years old. I'll be happy. It doesn't work that way. I can want and wish
Yes.
and hope and pound my fist. It's not going to change a damn thing.
Our one of our heroes here on the Ace Theo channel is A. Enoch, and one line from his, written in the 30s, I guess, or maybe the 40s. He said, "It's a good thing that God lets us get old a little bit at a time, because if we were 17 years old and suddenly woke up and looked in the mirror and we were 80 years old, we would really freak out."
I did a thing like that on a friend of mine, young guy Max, saxophone player, and we're talking about getting high and shit. And I said, "So you did acid, huh?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "When was the first time you did LSD?" He said, "I think I was 16, and I was in my bedroom in my parents' house." And I said, "Kid," and he was like in his 20s now. I said, "Can you imagine if tomorrow morning you wake up sitting on the edge of your bed, 16 again, and everything you thought was this 10-year span was an
Mm-hmm.
acid trip?
Wow.
Could you prove otherwise? How do you know you're not tripping right now? And this is all a hallucination." And he's like, "Oh man, you're freaking me out." But it's true. We don't know. We think, we believe, but deep down, we don't know a goddamn thing,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And people will take that to the extremes. Well, we could be a brain in the vat. Yeah, we could be a goldfish dreaming we're a human. We don't know. But then the philosophers will take all that shit into the umpteenth degree, which is why I tell most of philosophy that I hear is as ridiculous or non-ridiculous. It's the same thing as theology, except you're using other things besides God.
Right.
You know? Well, God created us. No, we're created by chemicals. What's the fucking difference? What if the chemicals are God?
Mm-hmm.
I can't accept that. That's like people hate my definition. How do I define God? What do I believe? Do you believe in God? Define God. I'll get 100 different definitions of God. When I define, I don't believe in God as It's a word that I throw around just, for so other people kind of get a clue what I'm talking about. But I say I believe in a creative and motive force of the universe, a unified, a single creative and motive force of the universe. You can call it God. You can call it a grand unified theory. You can call it whatever the fuck you want. It isn't going to change what it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you can call gravity pizzle snacks. It's not changing gravity just because you called it some other name. You know, and that's what I think. And then they'll say, "Well, do you believe?" Yeah, I believe in Jesus, but not your Jesus. What do you mean? Well, I believe that Jesus was the final atonement, and that Leviticus 16 fits in with most of the gospel narratives, and I think Leviticus 16 was a foreshadowing of Jesus, and that Jesus is not, in my opinion, the atonement is at one. You're at one with, you realize that you're one with God. You're just a little tiny speck in the universe, but you're a part of God. You're at one with God.
Mm-hmm.
And it has nothing to do with an afterlife. That's something else that I don't really care about, because I don't care if there's an afterlife or not. It's not my concern. I don't know what's beyond that door. I don't think anybody does. And I really don't care. All I know is one of these days I'm going to open that door. And I could be worm food, burning in hell, up in heaven, chugging beers with Eric the Red in Valhalla. I don't know. And I don't pretend to know. And I really don't care. Because what will be, will be. Whatever is behind that door is out of my control. So I don't care about that. So maybe that's why I don't see that. And when people try and make Jesus as a, how do we call it, a ticket to heaven, I don't grasp that. And I'll always say, well, heaven is filled with Christians. I'd rather be in hell. Because that would be hell.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't see that. I see Jesus as a fulfillment, or that Leviticus 16 was a prophecy, whatever you want to call it, a foreshadowing, a prophecy.
So what is Leviticus 16 all about?
Leviticus 16 at its basic is the purification, the reunification of Judea at the time. Well, actually, Judea, Israel, that gets confusing, so I won't go there. We'll call it Israel. The annual ritual for Israel to become one with God, to purify ourselves symbolically, and to be at peace with our God. Okay? To do that, send the high priest to get 2 of the best of the flock, 2 goats. All right? 2 good goats. Bring them to the temple. And the priest will lay his hands upon him and put all the sins of the temple on that goat. And then ritually slaughter it and throw it on the altar as a sacrifice to God for the sins of the temple, of the priesthood. They're cleansed now. We're going to start the year anew. We're going to be reborn. The other goat, the priest will lay his hands upon him and put all the sins of Israel upon that goat. And then that goat will be handed off to a man who will release the goat into the wilderness.
Or into the condo village.
Yeah.
Now.
And then the man takes the goat and lets it loose into the wild. It's now a wild goat. Doesn't say it's going to die or it has to be sacrificed. It's let loose into the wild. What will be, will be. If the goat gets torn up by wolves or lions, so be it. If he gets off and finds another little girly goat up there in the mountains and has a little family, so be it. It don't matter. The transaction, the atonement, was made as soon as the goat was handed off. Okay? And it was for the people of Israel to finally realize you are one with God. Remember that for the next year. And we know that your memories are short, so we're going to do this again next year. That's Yom Kippur in a nutshell.
Oh, that's what Yom Kippur is.
Now, we look at the Gospels. We have two righteous men, John the Baptist and Jesus. Okay? Who ended up as a meal offering on a silver plate?
John the Baptist.
Your voice, your sound just disappeared.
How about John the Baptist?
Now you're a little louder.
Okay. Who was? It was John the Baptist, I believe.
John the Baptist was in prison, executed, and his head put on a silver platter to be presented to Herod's daughter. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There's a good goat sacrificed by the priesthood. The king and the priesthood are the same thing. There's no difference in Israel. Okay. So there's the sacrificed goat. What happens to Jesus? Well, the priests take him and blame him for everything, and he's a piece of shit. Hand him over to Pilate. Hand it over to the man who will turn him, release him to the man who will cast him into the wilderness, into the Roman hands.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So, in my belief system, my theology, if you want to call it that, the atonement was made when Jesus was handed the atonement for all mankind, because now it's not a goat, it's a human. Right?
Mm-hmm.
The atonement was made as soon as Caiaphas handed Jesus over to Pilate. That's my theology. That's the gospel of Dwayne. Now you can turn up your volume so we can hear you, Theo.
Okay, how about now?
No, barely hear you.
Well, turn up your volume then. Because
Still
I
can't
don't
hear
have
you.
any more control over it.
Somewhere along the line, your mic went out.
Oh, yeah, okay. How about that?
No, you're still quiet. Don't you wish you could do that to me?
Yeah.
All right, while you try and fix that, I'm going to use the little boy's room. Be right back.
Oh, okay. Now I fix it. You know, these little fingers, sometimes they do all kinds of things. I must have hit the mute button. Okay, testing 1, 2, 3. Got it? Good. Testing 1, 2, 3. Okay, good. Thanks, Tommy. I'm
Okay,
back with you. I
get
fixed
your
the
mic
problem.
working.
Yes, I did.
Still can't hear you.
Oh, is it low or can you hear me at all?
Very low.
Well, I'll just have to speak up then.
Let me see if it's me or something else. All right, say something. Let me check this out.
All right, so let's see if that works. Hello, hello, hello.
No,
It must be you because everybody else says they can hear me at the moment.
yeah, I can't hear you on StreamYard or YouTube.
Okay. Well, let's wind the show up then.
I guess we can end this and pick it up some other time, maybe if you want.
I thought you was off for now.
And thanks for having a chat with me. This was nice. Thank you. I'm gonna head out now.
Yeah,
Take care.
okay. Bye, DB. All right, so one last sound check. Can you hear me? 1, 2, 3. Testing, testing. Anyone want to jump in? There's your little link. Okay, Greg, thank you. So, what did we learn from DB? We learned that he believes that he is a part of this great thing, at least a speck of it. We can't ask for more than that, can we? Because faith is a gift. Tommy, Greg, Michael Thunder, hop in here, boys. We still have a half an hour before we're at the 3 hour mark. How can we cut it off at before 3 hours? That would be a sin. So anyway, that was thoroughly enjoyable. So now you know that if he's in on the chat side, his purpose, and everyone has a purpose, his purpose is to make you think while he thinks as well. And thinking is hard. So there. Hello, Brother Tommy. I see you. I can almost hear you. DB Michael says, I enjoyed you today. Greg says, a very intelligent analyst with a wide range of topics. So there you have it. Okay, Tommy, are you back? Plug your mic in. No? Okay, I can't hear Tommy. Maybe he'll come back in. So you just hang on just for a second here. Hang on. I'm looking for something. Okay, I found it. Is that better?
I'm healed. Praise God for Apple technology.
Yes. Well, how do you like DB now?
Swell.
Mhm.
Swell. I'm down.
You're down with the grace of God?
I'm down with the grace of God.
Me too.
And
So
we're
here
back.
I wanted to bring this up. Not that I am intelligently choosing this. It's just this was open on the screen, on my screen, and so verse 6 it says, "According as Abraham believes God, and it is reckoned to him for righteousness." And I think that would be an appropriate verse to end on DB's chatter. Abraham believes God. DB seems to believe God to some degree or another. So there.
Fair enough. I neither confirm or deny. Yeah, but yeah. God bless DB more and more in the name of our Lord Jesus.
Amen. You got plans for the rest of the day?
No, apart from breathing. And let's see what else. I may hook up the trailer to the Nissan, some other severely boring things. Try and find a hangout,
Oh, yeah.
Proclaim the good news of our Lord Jesus Christ. You saw me earlier, didn't you?
Oh, that's right. You were on, let's see, was it Talks channel?
I think it was Togs, yes.
I didn't jump in or participate. They were talking stuff that I thought was rude. So
Oh, Ace.
I forgot. It kind of like fart jokes or something. I can't remember.
Right. Potty humor or something.
Right.
Unamusing potty humor. Okay.
I don't remember what it was, but I wasn't interested in
And
trying
you
to.
weren't in the mood, were you? Inside. I don't know why, but everything's on time. That's what I heard.
Hill Dweller thinks I'm as long-winded as DB. Okay. It's because I have plenty of tobacco that inspires me.
The gifts and calling of God are without repentance.
Mm-hmm. And who would repent from the gifts and calling of God?
I guess God.
Right.
I guess it's referring to him, that his gifts and his calling are without a change of mind.
Mm-hmm.
He won't back out on you. He's not going to be a Johnny take back,
An Indian giver?
Well, yes. Feather, dot. It's all good. Yes.
I resent that Indian giver stuff because you know who reneged on the Indian treaties?
Don't tell me Ulysses S. Grant.
Over 400 Indian treaties the U.S. government reneged on.
You're not going to start busting on the United States of America, are you?
Okay, I won't start on it.
That's okay.
I already started on it.
Oh, okay.
I'm just not finished yet.
Go ahead. It's okay. It's all right. God shed his grace on thee.
Russell Means said, we're all living on the reservation now. Isn't that the truth?
Sounds truthful. This land is your land.
Okay, so DB's probably still listening. You got anything you want to pass on to him?
I already blessed him. I'll bless him again. God bless DB, all he loves, and all that love him more and more. In the name of our Lord Jesus Christ.
We're all on the reservation now.
We're back in the USSR. Oh, God. You don't know how lucky you are, boy. All right. I'm taking a break. God bless you, Ace. Thank you for your hospitality. Thank you.
Right on. DB, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your life and experience and your views on things. And I don't find anything very controversial in it. You're just like the rest of us, trying to find our way here. And as far as matters of theology, I don't see any problem with what you've got going on, because some of the things we've learned from Paul, which are not popular in the Christian world, is that all is out of him and through him and for him. He gives life and breath and all to all. And faith is a gift. And if you haven't been given faith, it's just one of the operations of God. So how do you fit it into your thinking? There you go. Winding up here. Grace to all of you. Good afternoon.